All right, so we're just gone 2 o'clock Eastern or whatever time that is in your time zone. Welcome to the Sharpen Your Interview Skills and Get the Offer workshop. So I think I've met most of you before throughout the Career Resilience program. For those who are just joining, welcome. I'm Mark. I lead the team at CareerCycles, and we're a career management social enterprise. We help people of all ages and stages make those big career and life choices. And I lead a company called One Life Tools. We built that storyteller that some of you use. I've been hosting a podcast called Career Buzz. Please subscribe. And I use all these tools in various courses, including one that I teach at U of T. And I'm really happy to partner with AFC on this career resilience program. David Hope is here to give us a bit of a welcome from AFC.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. Delighted to be here with you again. And hello to Lucy and Amanda Hancox, who has been very helpful to us, formerly of the Dancer Transition Resource Center and a consultant to this project. Has been very helpful in developing this series that I hope has been helpful to all of you. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I launch into a little bit about the AFC. So we want to invite everybody to add their pronouns to your Zoom name, and to do that, you can hover your mouse over the name, your name in the participants list on the right side of the Zoom window. Click on rename, and then add your pronouns, and click OK. If you have any questions or difficulties with this, you can reach out to Lucy in the chat if you need assistance with that. Also, I want to share with you that we're grateful to be able to present this program on the traditional territory of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people from coast to coast to coast, acknowledging their enduring presence on this land. We support community efforts to sustain relationships with Indigenous peoples based on respect, dignity, trust, and cooperation in the process of advancing truth and reconciliation. And if you'd like to find out more about the traditional lands you live on, you can visit native-land.ca, and Lucy can put that link in the chat for you as well. So about the AFC, our mission is to provide compassionate support to help Canadian entertainment professionals maintain their health, dignity, and ability to work. And during this pandemic, we have provided over $1.4 million and counting in emergency financial aid to professionals working in film and TV, theater, music, and dance to help keep the lights on and a roof over people's heads. And our goal is to help as many people as possible get to the other side of this pandemic so that everybody can return back to the work that is so valuable, the work that people were meant to do, and the work that means so much to all of us, creating productions for Canadians and people around the world to enjoy. Our main programs and services would include the Emergency Financial Aid Program, which has provided that $1.4 million to folks to help them keep their heads above water. We have also a personal support and advocacy program to help people untangle difficult issues and circumstances and put people back on a path towards sustainability. Financial wellness program, and of course this career resilience pop-up program that you're participating in today. We also have just launched mental health first aid training, and you'll soon be hearing more about our maintaining mental wellness program and other initiatives that we have coming down the line. And for more information, please check out our website at afchelps.ca. We hope that this has all been useful for you. It's our pleasure to bring it to you. And as I say, we're wanting to help people live and work sustainably over the long term, and help as many people as possible get through the really difficult time. So with that, thank you very much for being here, and back over to you, Mark.
Great, thanks, David. And I hope today is going to be engaging, effective, and worthwhile for all of you. So engaging, really, this interview business is a skill, and you need to practice. And so we're going to use a couple of breakouts, and you'll be engaged in some safe exercises and activities to give you some experience and build that muscle memory. So when you're in the interview, you've got that experience behind you. Effective, hopefully you really learn how to prepare and conduct and close an interview. And worthwhile, so after an hour and a half, you say, hey, that was a good way to spend a bit of time. we'll walk through how to prepare. So, you know, when you're in the interview, it's out of your control. You know, the interviewer asks you questions and, you know, you have some control, but it's their show. But the preparation is your show. You can prepare and research on your own. So I'm going to really emphasize how to prepare and practice. And then we'll go through some typical interview questions. You know, how do you respond? There were a few in the chat just as people were arriving. Tell me about yourself. You know, what are your salary expectations? And all these questions that I know people are worried about. And I'm going to ask you for more of those tough questions that you're worried about and try and respond to as many of them as possible. And then anticipate your specific challenges and being ready to respond, because, you know, you can't prepare for everything. How do you make a positive first and last impression in the interview? And a few practical next steps, not only for the interview prep, but this whole career resilience program. For those of you who have been part of it, which I think is most of you, we do have a number of steps that we've done, from Conversations Matter to the self-directed narrative assessment, and using the storyteller and having those small group career counseling sessions. So we'll talk about how all the dots connect and what you can do next. So how does that sound, everybody, for the game plan? So far, so good? Okay, so people are worried about interviews and they are stressed about it and they feel scared, and that's normal. Even in the best of times, which this isn't, interviewing is scary. And now, you know, it's a pandemic and you're interviewing by Skype or whatever you're doing, or Zoom. And so it's very worrisome. And wouldn't it be nice to have some preparation and understanding so that you feel confident and you feel like, you know, this guy, ready to go, feeling easy, comfortable, confident, ready to move forward. So, you know, everybody has their worries about interviewing, and I'm going to set up a poll in a moment, and I'm going to ask you, what are your concerns? So here's the poll questions, in case you can't see the poll. These are the questions, and I want you just to consider which ones of these apply to you. But I'm going to launch the poll now. Everybody see that? So it's multiple. You can add as many as you want. What are your concerns about the challenges of interviewing? So we'll leave that open for a moment here. I know a lot of people are uncertain about how to prepare. Even if you are prepared, there's that feeling of confidence that might be lacking, and you want to build that. People have all kinds of stories, especially during the pandemic, about gaps and lack of recent or relevant experience. Some people are worried about freezing up. Typical or difficult questions like, tell me about yourself. What else to make a positive impression? How do you ask for what you want? And when do you do that? In the first interview, in the second interview? So lots of you have lots of questions coming into this workshop. So let's just see what comes. That's a minute. Most of you have answered. So I'll end the poll here and I'll share the results. So what have we got? Everybody see the results? So that bottom result, how do I ask for what I want? 62%, right? And I bet you there's a lot of different wants. Flexibility was probably one of the ones that are probably on your mind, but probably many others. And what comes in second there is how to answer typical and difficult questions. And that's normal. Like, I've done a lot of these interview workshops, and that's a kind of high on the list. And everybody has their question that they're worried about. So we'll try and get a few of those, and we'll write them down and try and respond to them. And, you know, use our peer group here to see what we can learn together. You're also concerned about feeling confident, about how to prepare, about gaps, making a positive impression. So look at the lowest one. That's interesting. I freeze during the interview. So most people are not freezing during the interview. Some are, but maybe, you know, that isn't as much of the challenge as everything else. All right, so thanks for that. We're going to have a look at some of those tough questions. So I've heard a few already, and let's just see if I can jot some of these down. So in the chat, I saw already, tell me about yourself, salary, expectations. I'm just checking the chat to go back here. Oh yeah, do like Dina. At the end, they do, always say questions for us. Like, what do you want to ask us? And that's funny because, if you don't have any questions, like you may not have thought about it, but people think like, well, they must not be very interested in this job. But of course you are. So anything else? Throw other questions there in the chat. Why did you leave your last job? Somebody said. Yeah, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, who knows? 5 years is so far from now, in the middle of a crazy mixed up world. It's really hard to know. Yeah, and Birgit, why you instead of the other 5 people I'm interviewing you, right? Or why you want this job? Yeah, or the job is different, right? So Tim, right? Job different. Hey, this is different than everything else that's on your resume. What's up with that? Right? So thanks for those questions, and it's great to hear the questions. Yeah, Sebastian, what's the time? That's a behavioral question, and we're going to look exactly at how to answer those, and we've got a little structure for it. But for all of these questions, can I say that the common element is to think, what is behind the question? Like, why are they asking me this question, right? And I think it always comes down to the same thing. They're trying to find out your relevant experience and motivation for the job, right? Like, why do you want this job? The second last question, right? Like, do they want it or not? It's so surprising to hear people who do want the job and they don't sound like they want it, right? So I've seen qualified candidates who have a great story to tell not get the offer over the less qualified candidate who came across with a degree of enthusiasm for the job. Why do you want this job? I really do want this job. I'd love to work for the ABC organization in the XYZ job. And this would be a great move for me because of these skills and these experiences. They want to hear that you want it. They want to understand that you're motivated to do the job, right? Salary expectations, why do they want to know about that? Can we afford you, or can you afford us? And if I could just jump way ahead, because I know this one always comes up, can you avoid answering this question in the early interview? Sometimes it comes up in first or second interview. And really, like, if you want the job, and the money is important, of course, but you want the job, can we talk about salary when and if an offer comes? That is the best answer, right? Unless you know that you've got rent or mortgage payments, and if this job comes in at X and you need Y, then you might as well have that number. And that is true for some of you, but for many of you, it's like, you know what, I'd like to get to the next level and I don't want to shoot myself in the foot. So often not answering this question can be really helpful, and it keeps the door open to a negotiation further on. So, we're going to go through some of these, and I'm going to come back to these questions systematically, but I want you to think about why they're asking any of these questions and what they are going to learn from your responses, because if you have that, you've got a lot. So let me come back to those questions, and we'll hit that at this Q&A part, but I'd like to kind of give you a framework here to think about interviewing. So what can you do to prepare and research? Let's break those up into 2 steps: prepare and research before the interview. And then here you are in the interview, whether it's Zoom or in person, maybe in the future. There's that first impression, small talk, building rapport. Then there's the juicy questions and answer part in the middle. And then there's that close, and there's something for you to do here at the closing that I think is really important. And then the follow-up. So what are you going to do next? And are you going to send a thank you email or card? And what happens if they don't call you after 1 or 2 or 3 weeks? So this little structure gives us a chance to kind of go through this in steps. At the preparation, we're going to have one breakout because I want you to practice one skill that I hopefully will be able to share with you. And then we'll have one more breakout over here. Interviewing is really a skill that you can simply build. It's not that hard. And, unfortunately, interviewing is a bit of a win-lose game. And, many of us have won and many of us have lost. And so what can you do to increase the chances of getting that offer? Nice to get an offer even if you withdraw later, but let's get the offer. And so how can you do that? Well, it's a little bit academic here in terms of a structure that I'm giving you, but it all comes down to practice. And I think in addition to the breakouts today, I'm going to encourage you to practice some more. So let's think about this, and let's think about this in context, right? Because interviewing is only as good as the job that you're interviewing for. So what job are we interviewing for, everybody? Well, I've met some of you in small group career counseling, and I know you're all interested in different things. And so I grabbed a job, just a simple, job search led me to this company called Sykes. I know them. They're based in Canada and the US. They have jobs. There are live jobs right now on their website at sykes.com. One of the jobs they have is a customer service rep, work from home. Like most, maybe not all the jobs in the US now, but many jobs are still work from home. And if you look at the job posting, this is what they say, right? What is essential is connect with customers with empathy, okay? Problem solve and offer helpful solutions, excellent listening and communication skills, written and verbal. So there weren't that many, bless you, whoever that was, there weren't that many requirements. And just to make a distinction here between what's essential, what they really want, and often, you look at a posting and it says, these would be an asset to have French, or it would be an asset to have this or that other credential. So I want you to kind of parse the essential from the nice to have. And so if we do a practice interview or some questions today, let's use this job, unless you have another job in mind, right? And when you're in your small groups, I'll have you share that. Because if some of you have an interview coming up soon, let's use your real situation. But if you don't, let's practice, right? You cannot do an interview without thinking about what the job is and what the company is. So first off, pre-interview research, read the damn posting. It is amazing that people don't read the damn posting and look at what all those, the shopping list is, right? And there's a lot of things there, and you don't have to have all those things to apply. It's nice if you have 6 out of 10 makes for a good application. You don't have to have all 10 out of 10, but look at them and really understand them, because this is the source of your research and preparation, right? Because you're going to see, I'm going to pick one thing off of this job posting, and I'm going to have us practice off of this one skill that they want in the context of that. So in the pre-interview research, let's understand the job. Let's understand the requirements versus assets. Let's understand the organization, right? So why are you applying to this job and this organization? Why now? And so, hey, I like it because it's a home-based thing. I read on their website, it's a family-friendly environment, flexible and challenging work, etc. This is what they say about themselves on their website. Nice. Okay. So now we've learned a bit about the company. And you'd be shocked how many people, when I do practice interviews, and I've probably done 1,000 practice interviews, and I go to the company's website and I just read the headline right off the website, whatever their tagline is. And I say, what does, ABC mean to you? And people draw a blank. You can see that most people haven't gone to the company's website even to see the most basic information about the employer. So I'm not saying study every single page of the website, but do learn a little bit about the employer, learn a little bit about the organization, and find out as much as you can. LinkedIn is great. We did a LinkedIn workshop last round with the AFC group, and you can learn a lot about the organization, both from their LinkedIn page and from people who work there. So you can kind of search around LinkedIn and see who's worked there and find out what you know about Glassdoor.com is another good website. If people haven't looked at it, they have a lot of kind of corporate summaries, organizational summaries, and people review the employers. So it's kind of fun to look and see what people say. People who have worked there rate their employers. So you can kind of get a little bit of insight about that organization. Are they a good organization? What's their management style? So that is something that can be really helpful to look at. And we will make all these slides available, and there will be a recording of it too. So that's a little bit about research. Find out about the company, the job, your perspective on it, and then we're going to come up with a game plan. How can you prepare? So a couple of points. One is have a game plan. First off, know your resume. That may sound so idiotic to say, but honest to God, I've done a lot of practice interviews, and I'll pick a line off of somebody's resume and I'll just ask about it, whether it was a job or, that interest section that you have at the bottom of your resume, the one that says interested in theater and reading and travel. Oh, what was the last book you read? Oh, you're interested in podcasts. What's the best podcast that you've listened to in the last few months? So really, every word, every line on your resume is fair game for an interview. So if you're sitting there already waiting, you're there a half an hour early, you're sitting on the Zoom call a half an hour early, why don't you read over your resume and make sure that you understand every single line, especially if you didn't write it. If you bought some resume service, which I'm not such a big fan of, but if you bought a service and got a resume, do you know what's in there? Anticipating the employer's questions and preparing responses. So we're going to do that today, right? And one of the ways we're going to do that is we're going to use this STAR principle. And I bet you some of you are familiar with this, but for those who aren't, this is probably the single most useful thing you're going to get out of this workshop right here. And I'm going to share it with you in a moment. How to organize the responses to these either behavioral questions or resume questions. And then, like somebody said, right, what questions do you have for us? So you should walk in your back pocket with 3 or 4 questions for the employer when they turn it over to you and say, what questions do you have for us? Because you seem quite unprepared or you are not interested if you don't have any questions. So let's jump into this STAR principle, right? And I just want to share this idea here. Some of you have seen this. It's all kind of theory until you put it into practice. So I'm going to ask you to practice this in a moment. So first of all, it's an acronym. It's an acronym that organizes proof of your skills for the skill that the employer asks for. So if the employer says, give me an example of how you solved a problem. Give me an example of how you made a decision in the face of uncertainty. Give me an example of how you worked in a team. Give me an example of something where you had to make a change in the last minute, right? Like these are all the same kinds of questions. They're called behavioral questions. And the same thing applies to resume questions. Oh, tell me about this job you had in 2017. That looks really interesting. Same kind of thing. They're asking for a story. And so, here's a way for you arts and entertainment workers to tell a story. The situation was, right? So it was 2017, right? Let's dive right into a specific story. The situation happened. When did it happen? What were the circumstances? T for task. My task in this situation was, right? This is what had to happen. The actions I took then break down that problem-solving skill. What did you do? What did somebody else do? Make sure to say I, versus we. R for results. So what happened? What was the outcome? Did the problem get solved? How much time was saved? How many dollars were saved? Who responded to you and said, hey, nice job? And then this is an underutilized little trick, link. So now that I've told you about problem solving, here's how it links to your job, to the job I'm interviewing for. So let me give you 2 examples of this, and then I'm going to ask you to give it a try in small groups. So let me just say, you can draw examples from both work and personal life, right? And I've got one of each. And I just kind of made these up. Forgive me if they're a bit rough around the edges, but interviewer says to you, give me an example of a time when you solved a problem. Well, the situation was, I worked front of house at a theater. It was Canada Day, small town. There was a huge traffic problem outside. We were short staffed, 3 people, including the manager. They're all stuck in traffic. They're calling me. My task, T for task, was to problem solve, to minimize delay. The show must go on. It's just chaos outside. So I wanted to minimize delay. Actions, the actions I took. I created a couple of queues because people were all jumbled up. I had one colleague do box office, another take tickets, and I ran outside and I provided traffic directions. I contacted 2 casual staff who lived nearby and had bikes so they could whiz by all the cars that were stuck. And the result was when the manager arrived, the queue was minimal, happy patrons appreciating our efforts. The show was only 5 minutes delayed. Link. I can think on my feet and problem solve through to resolution as your customer service rep here at Sykes. There you go. Like that took me what, 90 seconds, you know? So there's a work example. It walks you through a specific example, right? Example 2, let's try a personal example, because maybe some of you don't have, you know, some of that work experience, but you have, let's say, a family or kids, and you're drawing on some of that experience. So situation. My daughter was not learning at school last year. The teachers made a bunch of adjustments, but other students resented her for all of the accommodations she got, and then that support was discontinued. My task, I needed to explore a much more progressive alternative right away. The actions I took were to approach the school system, not just the teacher, but the principal, the social worker, and I asked them to do some in-class observation. I went through all the proper channels. I elicited support when needed. And the result was I was able to switch my daughter to a different school. Within 3 months, we saw definite progress. And linked to my job here, my potential job at Sykes, this experience reinforced my ability to problem solve, communicate with an entire system to resolve a situation. And I bring those problem solving skills and communication skills to support my team and the mission here at Sykes. There you go. So I'm going to ask you to try this, right? It's, I think, the single most useful little skill. And let me just reinforce this with one further thing, that if you listen to interviewers complain about interviewees, and tell me if any of you have hired, because I bet you some of you have, one of the main complaints of interviewers about interviewees is that they were too vague. They were too vague. They gave general, oh yeah, I'm a great problem solver. I problem solved at job 1 in 2015, and I problem solved a lot in job 2 in 2018. And I problem solved even more in this last job during the pandemic. And what you get is you get this thin layer of breadth with no depth. And I think that's the wrong approach. The right approach is pick one story and tell it well and go deep, right? Can anybody confirm that? Has anybody on this call ever interviewed? And did you ever have that experience that, you know, I just don't get it. Does that person have that skill or do they not have that skill? Wait, so somebody is chatting an answer there. Yeah, oh yeah, look, so see, exactly, right? So yeah, does the process of pride, Brunella, we're gonna go to pre-screening and talk about that because that's a different kind of interview. They could. Yeah, good. So, all right, everybody ready? So here's what we'll do. Let's do small groups of 3, and Lucy's been working on small groups of 3 to give us a chance. So say hi to everybody for a minute, and then about 2 or 3 minutes each, so this will be about 10 minutes, you know, systematically ask your interviewee, and everybody take a turn, give me an example of a time when you solved a problem. Let's go with exactly the same question. And the interviewee says, try it, star, the situation was, my task was, the actions I took were, and the result was, and here's how it relates to that customer service job. If you want to do a simulated interview for a different job because you have a real interview coming up, tell your small group and you could shift it. But if you don't, then let's go for this customer service rep job at Sykes. Questions? All right, so about 10 minutes, and we'll give you maybe like a 2 or 3 minute warning, and we'll kind of tell you it's time to switch around. So about 2 or 3 minutes each. All right, let's give that a try, Lucy. So let's just see. Everybody is just coming back now. Welcome back, everybody. So let's just hear how that went, right? I want you to think about the skill that you heard, and I want you to think about this job, right? Because the skills that you heard need to fit the job. It wasn't that complicated, but this is what they do. They ask for skills off of the posting, looking for a story. So you all just had a chance to share that story. I'd love to hear a few comments. A, how was it to say it out loud and tell a story? And B, as the listener, you're the interviewer, you're playing in the role of the interviewer. Did you hear the skill that makes you confident to say yes to the candidate? So comments. Nicole, I know you had one idea there. Do you want to just share that thought?
Sure. So what I was saying to my group and to Mark is that, every time I go into an interview and they ask questions that I'm sort of stumped on or I have to like rack my brain for, I always think, why did I not prepare properly for this interview? Because we can go and get a bunch of questions online, very easy to properly prepare. Then you would go to the interview with a certain amount of relaxation where you could then show more of your personality and not be like worried that you're going to get stuck on a question. So I don't know why, but it's next interview, I'm preparing in advance.
Thanks, Nicole. So the prep, right, just this muscle memory idea, right? If you do a few practices off of these kinds of skills in the posting using the STAR structure, we can't predict every question that we're going to be asked, but once you practice it, then the structure is there and it makes you more confident to be able to get at that story, right? Because your job in these questions, pick a good story and tell it well. And it's not that hard, but the candidate who does it gets the offer, and the candidate who doesn't. And it's hard to get interviews, so don't blow it, be the candidate who gets the offer. All right, other comments? How was it for you to tell? Yeah, Heather, how was that?
I was struck in sharing with the group about your comment about just that, pick a story and tell it well. And in my early days as an actor, I would go into the room and they would ask me, so tell us what you did this past weekend, or tell us a little bit about yourself. And the first couple of times I was bunny in the headlights. And then somebody suggested that I rehearse and practice such a story. And so, and when I started doing that, I started getting a lot more success, more comfort, more confidence. And then I could start to also riff in the moment. So I think that in some cases, many of the stories that we could pick can be easily adapted to the circumstance and the skill set, especially if they're something happened, I'm in charge, this is what I thought, this is how I managed it, these are the results. Which is basically the STAR situation. And then the key part is the bridge back, linking it back to the circumstances. So I rehearse.
Nice, thanks, Heather. And all of, you'll see at the end, I have a next step. Pick a few job postings, highlight the skills that they want, get somebody to ask you these behavioral questions, embedding those skills, and just practice telling a story. So did anybody share a personal story? I think I popped into one room. Many of you had work stories, which is great, but sometimes you don't. And just even a personal story demonstrates a transferable skill that could be relevant to the workplace. Did anybody just try that as a personal story? Yeah, Jane, how did it go to say that? And how did your breakout room participants react to it?
So I thought it was sort of a good sort of show of discipline and being aware and all sorts of things like that. My breakout room participants were they told great stories, each of them, but they did wonder why I wasn't more sort of direct and sort of blunt with the person involved. And I was about to tell them, well, first of all, it isn't really going to relate well to the task at hand, which is trying to show that you're discreet and you're kind and you're empathic and you listen to people and you try to sort of be understanding and work with everyone's needs and concerns. But I was concerned for the person involved, and I didn't want to make things worse for her. Is what I tried to tell them, except that we were cut off because we ran out of time.
Nice. But, even, what you're explaining is appropriate for a problem-solving skill that was customer service oriented, right? So this isn't kind of like a logistics or a supply chain management problem solving. This is a customer service problem. And so, there's nuances there, and I think you're sharing the nuances. It's nice when your interviewers probe, because it says, hey, I'm into your story. I've heard a lot. I've got some questions, and it turns it into a conversation, which is nice. So don't be put off by the probes from the interviewer. It means that, they're giving you some more opportunity to share and that they're curious and interested.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I actually was thinking along the same lines, because there were times when I wanted to ask, the people telling the story questions as well. And I thought, well, I'm going to wait until the end. And then we got into another discussion. So, but I can see how that, yes, people may offer you other solutions that either maybe wouldn't have been appropriate in the moment or are actually way better, like just a way better idea.
Yeah.
And missed the boat.
And in response, Sebastian, to your question in the chat, which is really interesting about, is one enough, right? So I would say in most cases, one is the right answer because it gives you the chance to go deep in that one story. Pick the good story, tell it well. But a caveat, sometimes you're in an interview and you go barreling off with this story and you stop yourself and you realize, what, either this story isn't demonstrating the skill or I've got a way better story. So, sometimes it's better to cut yourself off and actually say, let me stop for a moment. Upon reflection, I really want to share something else with you. And you might just do that. I've seen people do that. And I think it's a better bet, especially if the one story didn't have great results. I think if you have two stories and you're trying to think, which one do I tell? Pick the one with the better results. That's the answer. Pick the one with the better results, right? But, you want to be concise. We gave you 10 minutes. It turned into 12. So, there's 3 of you. So you took like 3 or 4 minutes per person. I bet you can do that with practice in 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes. So I'm not saying that there's a time limit to these things, but your interviewer has like a list of questions and they want to get on with it. So you want to be concise also. So let's just continue on. We'll get to the next breakout and another chance to connect in breakouts. Okay, so you've prepared and you've researched. You're now in the interview. Make a good impression by arriving on time. So that's like a first and important thing. And if you're going to be late, call or email or text or do something, but that's not great if you are late for an interview. If it's Zoom or Skype or whatever during the pandemic, do check your audio and your video. I did a practice with a guy for a very senior job, a practice just last week, and his Zoom skills were not great. It was going to be a Zoom interview, and it just it didn't work. We actually had to use the phone. I could see him, but he couldn't get his audio to work. So we videoed using Zoom and we audio over the phone. Check the background. Is it appropriate? Avoid noise and distractions. I find we're all working from home. So the formality of things, consider your clothing and, pick what's appropriate for what you think the job is. Eye contact is so funny. Right now I am putting my video pictures right under my webcam so that I'm giving you kind of close to eye contact. It's tricky because if I move this all the way over here, because I have 2 screens, and if I'm looking at that screen, I'm now looking at you, but how does this, if I'm trying to answer an interview question, this is very odd for you to be looking at me, right? So bring it as close as you can to your webcam so that you simulate eye contact. And then small talk at the beginning. Hey, how's it going? You know, what's your day like? If it's in a different city, how's the weather? You know, we're Canadian, we talk about the weather. And be prepared for all those little things on your resume, those interests at the bottom of your resume. Somebody will ask you a question, you know, reading, movies, theater, you know, so anything, have something relevant for every one of those words that you might have put in the interests in your resume. The questions, right? So what's behind the question? The interviewer is looking for your story, your situations, you know, the experiences that you've had, and then the skills that are relevant to their needs. Skills, personal qualities, experiences, if relevant, education, but not always, interests. They want to make a good decision, right? Turnover is terrible, right? Remember that intentional exploration, the Beyond the Job Boards workshop, I shared one stat that when you hire off of a job posting, the retention rate is much worse than hiring from referrals. It is a crapshoot, you know, hiring somebody that you don't know, going through the whole resume and interview process. And so they're trying to, you know, minimize their risk and make a good choice. You, therefore, need to clearly articulate your experiences with examples, stories where you've used those skills. And, you know, don't embellish, don't overstate anything. That's bad, right? If you overstate something, you know, and they find out later, that's grounds for immediate dismissal. But do be your best self so they can evaluate in this word that you often hear, fit. How's that person going to fit into our organization? So, you know, how do you do that? Well, you do it through a bunch of different questions. There's lots of flavors of questions. Open-ended questions. Tell me about yourself. Behavioral. Give me an example of those problem-solving skills. Or from the resume, tell me about this thing that you did in 2018. Situational, a hypothetical situation. What would you do if, right? So, you know, and that's lovely if you actually have a story. It's like, oh, that happened to me once. Great, then tell them. It becomes a behavioral question, or you just need to respond and deal with that, right? What would you do if there was a deadline looming and you knew the deadline was coming up, it was really soon, it was tomorrow, and you had a bunch of tasks and you knew you were not going to hit that deadline? What would you do? Good question, right? Is everybody ready to answer that? Right? And how to deal with those situational questions. And then the type of person. What do you do for fun, right? Or if you were to have dinner with 3 people from history, who would you pick? Or if you were, you know, an animal, what kind of animal would you be and why? And so again, why do they ask you these questions, right? They want to understand the kind of person you are. And so they ask these questions to give you a chance, right? Even the animal question. Has anybody ever had that one? And or any of those kind of type of person questions? Is there any examples that people have? Like those are sort of fun, interesting questions, but they can catch people off guard. So I'd be curious about that one. I hear the animal one I've heard, but you know, I think the more substantive ones are the first 4 bullet points that you hear. Yeah, the animal question. If you're an animal, what kind of animal would you be? You know, if you're a very social person, you know, you might pick the social animal. You know, if you say, gee, I'm the lone wolf because I really like being on my own and I don't like working with other people and it's a customer service job, you know, that's not a good answer. So you're going to be in trouble on that one. You know, so how does it fit? Well, you know, keep thinking, why am I being asked this question? So that can be really helpful. So let's dive into a few of these and think about them, and I'll give you one more practice, right? So what is behind the question? What do they want to know? Do they want to find skills or knowledge? Usually, right? Do they want to find some relevant experience that matches up with their job? Do they want to know what your career path is and will you stick around, right? Somebody said, what about that 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And if retention is really important to them, they want to know that you want to stick around and grow with the job, right? what type of personality to see if you fit with our team and with our customers or clients, so that they can use this word fit, you know. And I always encourage people, if you did not get the job, you know, to ask for feedback. And I know interviewers and employers are reluctant to give feedback because they don't want to get caught in any sort of discrimination concern. So they often don't give you feedback, but sometimes you can get really constructive feedback. You know, sometimes I hear people just say, oh, they told me that I just wasn't as good a fit as another candidate. Well, that's not so helpful. So do ask for feedback. It can be really helpful. So here are a few questions, and I'm going to give you a couple of these to deal with in groups of 3, right? So tell me about yourself. Somebody put this on the tough questions, right? Common question. It comes right at the beginning, maybe right after the why do you want this job question, right? And a minute. You can say a lot in a minute, right? What are the experiences and activities you've been up to in recent work, any education, and if you can draw from it any relevant skills, any certifications. You know, it's professional. Mostly we're looking for professional. If there's something relevant personally, great. You know, it's about a minute overview. Why do you want this job? What interests you about it? I think you need to really convey enthusiasm. I do want this job. I read the posting, you know, providing customer service, problem solving. I have a passion for working with people. Oh, that person sounds like they want the job. What do you know about us, right? It's shocking how many people don't do that research. Oh, I noticed that you had a new product that you launched in the middle of the pandemic, or I checked the news and I saw there was a leadership change. What are your strengths and what's your weakness? So this one we're going to practice, okay, everybody, in a moment, right? You know, and pick a strength. If they say, what are your strengths? Pick one that's on the posting, right? Oh, communication or time management, right? And here's an example of me using it. Weakness is just a very difficult interview question. You have to name something that is not a killer, right? Like for that customer service job, hey, you know, my weakness is working with people. I don't really like working with people. Killer, you have lost that job right then and there. So you need to name something that isn't killer and spend 2 seconds naming it and spend the balance of that minute talking about how you've overcome it and how you're much better now than you were at that thing, right? That's the way to deal with that question, right? Why should we hire you? Because I'm interviewing 5 other people and you're, you know, number 3 and I've interviewed 2 already and I'm going to interview 2 more. So why you? Hey, you know, here's the skills that I have that are in the posting. And here's a couple of unique things or unique situations or personality aspects that make it unique, right? And we did that in the online storyteller. I was encouraging people to kind of name their skills. And remember, we did that LinkedIn headline and how are you going to find 3 or 4 or 5 words that really summarize something unique using some common skills, but maybe some uncommon language. So here's a chance, right? In groups of 3, everybody take a turn, right? And if one of you could actually say it out loud, I'll copy this into the chat too, so everybody sees this. So everybody takes a turn, and what's a skill? What's one of your strengths? So name one and give an example. Okay, so if you could name one and give an example and see if you can link it back to the job. And what's a weakness? What's one, right? If they ask for one, don't give them 3, okay? Just give them one. Name something. Explain how you overcame it or you will do it or how it's not going to affect you in this job, right? One of those little tricks for this question, and see if you want to play with it. If any of you have ever done any of those personality type things, have any of you ever done them like MBTI or one of those? So, you know, like MBTI is an example of one where there's not a right or wrong. You're either a big picture thinker or you're a concrete thinker, right? And so I could say one of my weaknesses, you know, I'm a big picture thinker and sometimes, you know, I'm not as concrete as I'd like to be. And, so I've had to work really hard at focusing on the details. But my last job, had a lot of details. I was building workshops and delivering them, and there were a lot of details. And together with my team, I was really able to focus on the details part. And I feel like I've balanced out my big picture thinking with my concrete thinking. So I get away with it. I picked something that was just a natural personality kind of continuum from big picture to very concrete. And I kind of get away with it, rather than naming something that would be a real killer. So questions before we jump into the breakouts? Look for chat here. I've just put in the chat the 2 questions and kind of what to do. And again, let's do about 3 minutes each, 3 or 4 minutes. So aim for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back together. Everybody ready? Okay, let's try that. Hey, welcome back, everybody. All right, so look at that, everybody. You just had 2 little mini interview segments, and everybody is still alive. So nobody died. I know interviewing is a scary thing for many people, and it's uncomfortable, but practice is really helpful. And so good for you for doing a bit of practice with this and trying it out. Let's just have a couple of quick comments. How did that one go? The strengths question is kind of like a gift. It's an easy question. The weakness question is a hard question. And to some degree, you just have to deal with it. You have to weather the storm. So I'd be curious if anybody has any comments about how that went for either side. And we'll just wait for a minute and let us know. Put your hand up or just...
It's Dirk. I really enjoyed one of my colleagues, Jane. She turned her weakness into a positive at the end, which I think was really wonderful. So sort of she identified what her weakness is, the negative thing, and then, sort of placed it within the context of, using it as a skill going forward. Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, nice. So if you can do that, right? I mean, sometimes people masquerade a weakness as a strength as a weakness, and that's tricky. And I have heard of cases, and maybe you've heard this or had it, somebody offers something as one of the answers to the weakness question, and then the employer just rejects it. Like, give me another one instead. And then you have to think on your feet, right? And that's tough, right? So like you're saying, Dina, I don't know if you mean the cliche choices that you just put in the chat. Did you mean cliche choices about this weakness question? Because you can, I'm too detail oriented, or I'm too, I double check and triple check everything, so that's a weakness. Is it a weakness or a strength, right? So, I heard one guy in one of the interview workshops I did, it was one of these things, he gave one of those cliched answers, right? I'm too detail oriented. And the interviewer said, no, give me another one. That one is overused. And he just blurted out, he didn't know what to say. So he said, well, sometimes I'm kind of lazy. And he actually said, I'm kind of lazy. So he didn't get that job offer. Like, so maybe you need 2. Can anybody who's comfortable put in chat, because everybody's always looking for what are some things that I could say. And if you're willing to put in chat, the kinds of things that you just said, just as ideas, I think everybody will appreciate it. Maybe one more comment, how that went. Yeah, Birgit?
I have used a couple of those in the past, those answers, and I was okay with it, but it was not new to me to use the task that you gave us to talk about how to overcome it, or how I've been working towards overcoming it. And I thought that was actually something I am doing, so I'm not even inventing that, but I hadn't actually thought about it. So I was saying that I do tend to micromanage a little bit and have a hard time delegating, but I do think that I'm working on being able to, to step back and let other people do their job without me trying to make it better.
Nice. right? So micromanage, Denise, procrastinate. I mean, that's a tough one to say procrastinator, but as long as you do this trick of the overcoming it, right? And I think that's the key. You know, do not make the mistake of spending the whole 2 minutes telling them how terrible you are at procrastinating or micromanaging. Name it in 1 second, 2 seconds. Spend the next minute telling them how to soften that. And I think you'll find you're going to escape that question without, you know, unscathed. So thanks for trying that. Just to pull things together, like we've just got, you know, maybe 5 or 6 more minutes together. So I'll go through the kind of the end bits, and then, you know, we'll stick around, and if there's more comments or questions, we can open it up. But I do want to mention these special situations. You sometimes get a screening interview, which really is just, you know, somebody in human resources checking you out to see if you're actually good enough to bring to the main interview, right? So it's a screener, it's usually 15 minutes or so, and they can ask you anything. So, you know, even these kind of behavioral questions. So do be ready for that, but make sure you understand what's going on if you can, right? So that you know what's happening here, because how long will this interview be? You know, so somebody calls you out of the blue, oh yeah, that job that I applied for 3 weeks ago, you even forget. Okay, wait, let me just look at what I applied for. So, hey, just before we start, how long will this interview be? You know, what's the purpose of the interview? Like all of that is fair game, right? Multiple interviewers, right? This is very common. And, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 on a panel, depending on what it is. And so, you know, you want to be responsive to each person, and kind of direct your responses to the person who asked the question, but be mindful that everybody wants to hear the answers and that they probably have given them each other a kind of script for asking the question. More than one interview. So at the end of the interview, hey, well, what's going to happen next? Will there be a second interview, or will you be making a hiring decision based on this single interview? And so that's a really useful thing to know about. So let us know if there's any other kinds of situations, but you have questions come up in all kinds of things. Back when, you know, it wasn't the pandemic, sometimes you even had social times. There was an office tour or a lunch or something. But of course, you know, we're not doing that these days, but we might soon. So closing, you know, what questions do you have? And I'll give you a few example ones in a moment. You know, show them that you did your research. Like, you know, I saw on your website that you recently launched product X, and I was wondering how the rollout has been going, right? Then you show that you've done some research. Hey, really glad to have interviewed for this position. I want to restate my interest, right? Like, don't just say thank you. Say, I want to restate my interest, try and enter, leave it on a high note. Make sure you know what is going on and when, right? So who's going to be contacting whom? When should I expect to hear from you? Because I've had so many people like twiddling their thumbs. 2 weeks passed, they haven't heard. Should I call them? Should I not call them? So if you interview and they say, yeah, we will follow up with you in 1 week. And if you haven't heard from them in 1 week, you call that person or you email them and say, listen, I'm wondering where you're at in the process. It's been about a week. So keep the ball in your court so that you know what's going to happen. And if there's going to be a second interview, questions you might ask. What's a typical day look like? What's the percentage of time that I'd be doing A versus B? What would be the first thing that I'd be doing in this job? Hey, the company seems to have grown during the pandemic. How has that happened? How will you know I'm on track to achieve my own goals? Why is this available? You know, have somebody left, or did they hate the job and they all quit? Can you tell me about the person who I report to? Is it you, one of you people on the interview, right? Lots of resources here. Hayes has a bunch of really great questions that you can ask at your interview. Should you send a follow-up? Yes. Email is easy. If, you know, now everybody's working from home, so it's hard to send a note, but a note is so nice. You know, a handwritten note, you just don't get those anymore. Really interested in the position. A couple of key points about me. And if you felt like you missed something, has that ever happened to you at the end of the interview? You hit yourself over the head. Oh, I can't believe I didn't tell them. So you have a chance to say that one thing. Is it going to get you the offer? I don't know, but it's worth it, right? and try and write the questions down right after, because you will forget them. And then you can, kind of run through them later. Yeah, negotiating your offer is a whole other workshop, but it's certainly nice to get an offer, even if you decline, it gives you a sense of confidence. Like I always say, people say, should I go to the interview? I'm not sure about the job. If you think 100% you are not going to take that job, save everybody the time and effort. But if there's a little bit of maybe, go ahead and do the interview, right? Later you can decide. You might not quite know, but an offer comes. And it's amazing how good people feel when they get an offer. So, it's tough if you decline it after you get the offer, but it's something to consider. So next steps, find postings. Find postings, because you cannot do a practice interview for, some mysterious job. You need a job in front of you to do a practice. So find some postings that look interesting. And then find some questions. Like the Muse is a really great website. They've got zillions of questions and interview insights here, and practice, like not by yourself, but with somebody. In the practice, prepare 2-star responses, more if you want, but at least 2 gives you the feeling of it being more robust, so that you have the muscle memory of how to do that. Situation, task, action, results. Make a nice list of questions to ask at the end of the interview. Make sure you're ready. Have your resume printed and in front of you, and read it and reread it so that you know what's in there. Send that thank you note, evaluate, and be ready, because if they say, hey, we really like you, Andrew, can you give me 3 references, please? Okay, now that's not the time to start worrying about who your reference is going to be. You need to start thinking about that beforehand. So, just to pull things together, everybody, this was the bonus workshop within the Career Resilience Program. For those of you who are in the program, you're going through these meetings, small group career counseling. Let me encourage you to maximize your participation in that, and really, try and get the most out of it. Consider forming a capability partnership with that small group. So even after your 2 meetings are done, you can continue to meet and support each other weekly or bi-weekly. And we have a little bit of a guide. So we're going to follow up with people at this workshop with an email guide on how to do those partnerships. Please look for a brief program evaluation survey, and please fill that out. This was an experiment for AFC, and they invested on your behalf. And we'd love to be able to then say, here's how this worked or didn't work. And then we can adjust accordingly. And there are already resources. So if I just click here, there's a bunch of good resources, including the last 2 workshops. So I'll just open this up so that everybody can see these resources, the Career Resilience Resource Hub. So they've added the Career Resilience Program resources here. And if you go in here, we have the other 2 workshops we did in the first program, the Resume Revamp and the LinkedIn workshop. So all of that stuff is here. And so access those resources. AFC has been great to support this project. So hats off to AFC for helping. If you have questions about career counseling for anybody, for you or someone you care about, then we're here. We do career counseling, and it's been a real pleasure to work with AFC as part of this Career Resilience Program to hopefully help you not only find appropriate income generating activities while we all wait for this pandemic to be done with, but to support you in the moment in these tough times with hopefully some career management skills and some interview skills. So we're just about at time, everybody. If those who need to duck out, let's say a happy, what day is today? Is it Tuesday? A happy Tuesday. And please throw your comments in if you have comments on the workshop today. But let's say on the count of 3, happy Tuesday. And then anybody who wants to stick around and just have a bit of a conversation about interviewing, let's do that. But thanks everybody for your participation today. And I don't know, do we have David still on?
Nope.
Okay, so on the count of 3, unmute. 1, 2, 3. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.